Are the Florida State Seminoles really ready to make a major move forward? Today, we answer that question on Locked On Seminoles.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later on in the episode. The overarching theme today is Florida State ready as a football program to take a major step forward. To help answer that question, I've got 10 subpoints / concerns / questions to ask you, and I will give my own points as well. Please comment on the YouTube page. Please give your thoughts in any way you want, whether you agree, disagree, have a subpoint that you want to bring up, maybe an underlying concern about an injury, a player moving, somebody from the transfer portal, whatever it is, go ahead and make that comment or question. I'm ready for it. So let's get started on the overview here. We're going to talk about the defense and the offense. I've got 5 questions for each. I'm going to start with the defense, but I also want to understand the big body picture of everything. So if you want to talk about something else, again, if you're going to comment, something about special teams or anything, fire away. But again, I'm going to go defense first, 5 questions, then offense. But my biggest concern here, this is something I've talked about a little bit heading into spring, and it's why I'm doing this right now, right before the day that the Noles kick off spring ball. I want to know if they can adjust quickly, not just be a program that kind of meddles around here. Do they adjust quickly? We'll know based on Norvell's press conferences. We'll know on the assistant coaches and everything. So these are key questions. First one, number one, right off the bat, with everything that's going on defensively, how much does FSU play fast and how much are they just being forced to learn the system? This is something I've talked about multiple times, and it is by far my biggest concern for Florida State football this spring. Number one on the board. It's not even close, and it's why I started with defense. When you go from a 4-man front to a 3-man front, there's going to be a major adjustment for the players, especially at linebacker, because how they fill gaps is totally different. That can also change play to play because Florida State's going to be multiple. There is a lot of bookwork here, and it's a very fine line. Do the coaches give them too much in the spring? And it's more about paralysis by analysis than it is learning the playbook slowly and just doing something extremely well and dominating. College level, you can get away with that. Now, at the NFL level, outside of the Philadelphia Eagles front where they just rush 4 and drop 7, that's about the only team in the league that does that. By the way, they just won the Super Bowl. You have to be complex. Well, this is not the NFL. You must be able to keep kids from worrying about where they're supposed to be. When you think too much, you play slow on defense. And, of course, that leads to failure. Florida State, I think they will have maximum effort this year from the most, I'd say, I mean, not all players, but most of the players. And it will be a very big improvement from last season. I'm only concerned about one thing in that regard. Again, if you don't know where you're going, you're not really giving max effort. It's not because you don't want to, you're hesitant. Players that don't understand what they're supposed to be doing because they've given too much information in a short amount of time will fail. I hear about these things more back channel. Like 90% of the time, this is stuff you hear on the backside. You're not going to get any of that at a press conference. I can guarantee you, 0. No coach in any way, shape, or form up front admits they're trying to shove it down a player's throat. What you hear from people on the backside of things, players' parents, people that have been around practice, that's different. That's where media gets this stuff. I'm curious about that. And again, we will see it in some way, shape, or form later on in press conference, and especially the spring showcase. Anything that they do, even if it's just drills, you'll be able to tell if you have busts and coverage or anything that they show for Florida State later this spring. And I know there's more or less a media blackout. I'll touch on that a little bit as we go through the show, but there's going to be very little, just go ahead and say it, there's going to be very little spring for the media, like one practice. But regardless, it won't take very much. If Florida State forces too much and allows their players to just be engulfed, they'll also be engulfed this fall. Question 2 for the defense, and this is one that I'm just going to go ahead and say I love this. Terrance Knighton said, I believe we have the number one defensive tackle in college football in Darrell Jackson. I'm going to say that again. Terrance Knighton has admitted they have the number one D tackle, in his opinion, with Darrell Jackson. I'd love to believe that. Is it true? Darrell had more loafs last year in some of the games than I would care to remember. The North Carolina game and the Notre Dame games in particular, two teams that have NFL running backs. Do I really think that he was playing hard? No, I do not. I see it. I also need to see the rest of the defense play with that enthusiasm too. Now, there's been all kinds of talk about Darrell has become a leader. And if that is in fact the case, maybe that's what Potroast is referring to. Because it does start with that, 100%. If you're leading as a player, Darrell Jackson, from a physical standpoint, is really off a computer screen what you want a defensive tackle or nose guard. And he can play either. But that doesn't mean he's, again, maximizing his abilities. Does Darrell Jackson show it in practice day after day for consistency? That's what also that Knighton pointed to. That's what they have to get him to be. And we'll see. Practice is still one thing, but that's the starting point, and that's the only thing we can do because this is March after all. Number 3, this is one that's probably the most fun question for me, and the one I don't know why. It's just gut feeling. Call me optimistic for once, which that is rare for me, but I have a great feeling about James Williams, the transfer from Nebraska to Florida State. He's just up over 260 pounds, reportedly. If he's able to hold that weight down here in the South during spring ball, you could certainly drop some pounds. He might be down to low 250s after spring ball, but that's okay. I just want him to be healthy. He already knows the scheme, so he's at an advantage. I doubt he plays quite as much as some other guys, unless this is the sub-point question. Does he play more than one position? James is a quote-unquote natural pass rusher. He's 6'5", 6'6", and again, he's just over 260 headed into spring ball. Does he play that stand-up position, what I like to call the Lawrence Taylor position? That's the guy I remember from when I was a child and started to learn football. Like, nobody dominated quite like Lawrence Taylor. Or is he a guy that will, quote-unquote, bounce around? Does he put his hand in the dirt, even in a 3-man line occasionally, so they can put somebody else at the stand-up spot? And I don't know which player or players they might use, and allow him to go against maybe a right tackle sometimes, who's probably going to struggle with him on 3rd and 9, 3rd and 15. Good luck. Those are some interesting questions. And as another one, I hope they don't do this, but how often do they drop James into coverage? I hope it's not more than about 5%. I'm really curious how much they're going to do it, because some 3-man fronts with the outside backer, they'll move him to linebacker level, do different things. I just don't think he's that guy. I hope they mitigate it. And again, that goes back to my first point. Paralysis by analysis. Go downhill, make this very basic. Don't be all-encompassing with the offensive and defensive playbooks. I'm pointing at Gus, too. His playbook is massive. Less is more. Execute, do what you do well, and do it eventually elite by the end of spring ball. That's, in my opinion, the best way to go. Number 4, this is a fun one, too, because Florida State is known for, as long as I've been watching football, as one of the best DB schools in the country. They have Azariah Thomas going on to the NFL draft. Really good football player. Glad he's going to the NFL. He's just as deserving as it gets, because he really blossomed last year, took the reins, and was a guy that other teams avoided. But he's gone. Quindarius Jones. This is a guy that I've been high on for a long time. I thought he was good last year when he got his opportunities. He'd played some as a freshman. And now, maybe this is his time. Length, speed, experience, and he has some moxie to him. When the ball is in the air, he finds his way to the football. He knows how to break on it without just giving up the home run ball. He can take some chances without getting burned. He's learned techniques and tendencies. Now it's time to turn that into massive production. I think some teams will avoid him. I'm not going to deny that. But with Kai Bates and several other DBs like Edwin Joseph, Shaheem Brown, etc., it's not going to be easy to go, well, there's a guy over here, we could just pick on him. Florida State doesn't have anybody in the secondary from a physical traits perspective or even experience, really, because even a lot of the young guys, they played a bunch. So maybe maybe Quindarius could be one of those guys that's kind of a sneaky dark horse for an All-American spot, because nobody picked Thomas in that regard last year before the season, because he'd been a part-time guy as far as a starter and how much he played. And then his third year, which it's the same for Quindarius. Now it's his third year. Boom, he's in the spotlight. This is the first season that I expect him to be the key guy. Can he be DB1? That's really the question, but there's a lot to that. The leadership with it, fending off some of the younger players while also helping them from a leadership standpoint. You could ask 100 questions about Quindarius, but he's very important. If you have a true corner one that other teams must respect, your defense will be different. And it will also be a defense that you can have a lot of fun with if you're a coordinator, because you can play up or back and do different things with it and keep the quarterback off balance. Number 5, the final question here for the defense, is pretty simple. I've talked about the 3-man line, and this is one that I don't know if there's a specific answer to this, because it's a partial scheme question, but are they going to two-gap a lot? I don't necessarily think they will, because you need a certain kind of linebacker and a lot of depth to do that, because they will be taking on guards head up without any shade from a DT or nose guard. That is not easy. Not many teams do that in college outside of maybe Georgia. Tennessee's done it a little, and Alabama did it some as well, but it's not very often. And when they do two-gap, regardless of the amount, which guys do they feel best about by the end of spring practice, or up front, I think, except for the guys that have transferred in or played in it? I don't think they'll do very well. I think the O-line will win those battles. They got 4 transfers with starting experience. You're playing a new defensive scheme. Let's see how that goes. But defensively, outside of Stephon, who transferred in from Nebraska, has been in a 3-man system, has seen some two-gap. How much do they play it? That's going to be kind of fascinating for me. I know we're not going to get a lot of look at it, but I'm assuming that Florida State will show some drills and stuff through social media. And, of course, the coaching staff will talk about it as well. But if they can run both effectively, it massively changes how impactful your defense can be come the fall, especially playing against a team like Bama in game 1. You've got to have some schematic advantages, because if they know what's coming with that offensive staff, and they got great offensive staff, you're in trouble. So that's an important thing. By the end of the spring, we need to see a defense that, if they really want to, and at least mixing it up, they got to be able to two-gap with that three down front and do so well. When we come back, we're going to switch to the offensive side of the ball. Some more questions and concerns here on Locked On Seminoles. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and Clear-Cut Team of the Week is the Florida Gators. The Gators, led by Walter Clayton, 17 points a game, just dominated the SEC tournament, winning each game by at least 9. Not only did Florida grab the 4th number 1 seed, but they're the nation's most efficient offense. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Florida Gators have done. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out there ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find the next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. This show is also brought to you by our friends at Fabric from Gerber Life. Life moves fast, especially when you have family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply term life insurance online right from your couch, so you could be covered in under 10 minutes. In many cases, no health exam is required. Peace of mind. If you want to have that for a person that's got kids, it's not easy. So you want to make sure your family is financially protected no matter what happens. Fabric gives you the peace of mind that you need. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just 5 minutes and meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Time to move to the defense. Move to the offense. Florida State has a lot of different questions on that side of the ball, but I think that it's a little bit less complex in the defense, and that's why I went with it second. You know who the quarterback's going to be because he's brought in to operate Gus's offense, and you got 4 offensive linemen. So 2 biggest questions were taken care of through the transfer portal. That's important. But we still do have some questions and concerns, but I'm more excited about the offense than I am the defense right now because I think there's more clarity. With that, here are the ones that I have the most questions about. And again, if you have anything that you want to add to this, if you think that I missed something, fire away with questions on YouTube and let's get after it. So, number 1, Thomas Castellanos. Does Tommy go out there and just rip it from the get-go? I don't know. I think a lot of that is going to be based on the following question. How much of a rapport does he have with his receivers by the end of spring? You're going to have some moments in practice, some good days and bad. That's all fine. But does he feel comfortable with Malzahn's offense? Well, he's played in it before, so he should. But now it's just chemistry with the receivers. How many guys are healthy? How many guys are really ready to run the routes? And how many guys are on the same page with him? There's really no 2 positions, in my opinion, in all of sport more connected than the quarterback and the wide receivers on a given football team. Florida State's no different. Does he find that chemistry early on, which will help, quite honestly, shape the game plan right out of the gate when Florida State hosts the Alabama Crimson Tide? If you host Alabama to start a season, you better have your receivers ready because I know Gus wants to run downhill, and that's great. You're not going to run for 320 yards right out of the gate against Bama. I'm just going to go ahead and guess. You're probably not going to run for 200. Maybe you can if you hit some big plays, broken plays from Thomas, which is certainly possible. But you're going to have to need, say, 4 or 5 plays in the passing game that are not just pick up a first down, but they're chunk yardage plays. That timing, that rhythm, how much does he have with his receivers? Deuce is going to be the one that everybody talks about the most, Deuce Robinson, and that's fine. But how much confidence does Thomas have with those guys? And to that point, does he have enough confidence to say there's a clear-cut number 2, even if he just does it in private, after spring ball? That's something I've brought up several times during Locked On Seminoles in the last month or 2. And I don't really want to admit this, but I just don't see how that's not the most important thing. They're going to be able to run the ball. They got a really good running back room, and Castellanos has obviously elite athleticism. He might be the best pure athlete on the team. He's certainly in the conversation. They're going to run the ball. That passing game, that common chemistry that you got to have is my biggest question and concern. There's no way to really know it. We need to hear more about it. And it's the one thing with the media, quote unquote, blackout that I'm concerned about, because it's not like Norvell or anybody else on the offense is going to admit that they're struggling with it. If they are, we won't know until the end. You might see some of it in the spring showcase or whatever they do. They're going to do something at the end, I would assume. If they don't, and I hope they add something, and maybe I'm just being too positive, but maybe they added more media access towards the end because it's going well. I have no idea. Whatever it is, it's still in doubt. But if they're playing well, I think there's more opportunity to showcase it. We'll see. Number 2, I talked about they got 4 transfers. And that offensive line should be one of the better offensive lines in the ACC if it's healthy. My concern is twofold. Number 1, I don't trust the depth. We've talked about it 100 million times on this show. If we talked about it once, that's Florida State not recruiting high school linemen at the proper level for years. That has not suddenly changed. It's getting better. I like some of the guys they got in this past class. They've got a few other guys, but right now, the way it looks, you're going to have 4 starters that are transfers. Maybe the 5th guy's a transfer as well. They'll figure it out. Who starts where? Like Pettis, probably the right tackle, etc. There's some question marks that'll take care of itself, and they got to figure out the backups. But my biggest concern is the most basic of things. How good are they at run blocking for inside runs? Because in Gus's offense, if you do not run the ball between the tackles, and he openly discussed this during his first press conference, we're going to run the ball downhill because it makes the passing game a lot easier, and we're going to take deep shots. He always says the same thing wherever he's at. He's consistent, and he does. I've covered him. I've covered UCF. That's what he wants to do. So if they do not have chemistry at running the football downhill, Florida State's offense will stink. No doubt about it. So outside of the chemistry, with the ability to get the receivers and quarterback on the same page, I know they're going to be able to run it, but to really run it, to be good, to be a 200-yard per game team, which they should be with the amount of athletes they have, how good are they right out the gate? How much chemistry they have? By game 4 or 5, I don't have any doubt they'll have it. But again, you're playing Bama in game 1. I don't expect them to run for 200 yards against Bama, but you would need to at least be 150 yards in that game, or it's not going to go well. If you're running for like 70, 80 yards in that game, it's going to be ugly. By the end of the third quarter, that game is going to see people leave it. You need to be able to do that. That starts with chemistry. Question 3, running back depth chart. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's not like Florida State's struggling with talent. Like Singleton would start at a lot of schools. He may not even be the number 2 running back. That's a good problem to have. He had a 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown last year. He's a well put together athlete, can beat you inside or out. And he may not be in your 2 deep. Look, that's a great situation. So I'm going to look at this from a broader perspective with a couple of subpoint questions. Who's the main starter? I'm guessing Rodell. Maybe it's Sam. Maybe it's Cam. Maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. It depends on how they want to do it, but that'll get broken down in spring ball. But do they have roles for 4 or 5 guys, which they certainly have the talent to say it that way, Jalen Lucas, etc., when they're all the way to fall camp? You start to piece that together in spring ball. Third down back. It's twofold. It's not just somebody that can catch. You need a running back that if you're playing a team where the tackle is struggling because the other team has got blitzes or they just have an elite NFL level edge rusher, whatever it is, you need somebody that's really good at helping block. Who is that guy? It may not be somebody that runs for 200 yards all year, but at the same time, if they're great in pass protection, I know coaches hate it. Sometimes you got to pull the running back out of the pattern. They got to help. Who is that guy? Speaking of passing, I've said it a bunch. I'm very high on Jalen Lucas. I hope he comes back healthy. I think he can be a nightmare, especially in Gus's offense. Along with Squirrel White, I think they'll both play slot, and they'll find different ways to get him the football on draws, on screens, and even some inside runs that'll be surprising because Gus can scheme it up. Where do these roles take him? Then next, the number 2 receiver. This is the one that I've talked about a lot. Hakeem Williams is the guy we would like to see because he's big. Having Deuce and having Hakeem, if they are the 1-2 punch, would be electric. Let's see how that goes. But definitively, at the end of spring, does Florida State have a number 2 receiver? No doubt about it. The number 2 is who? If there is not, again, that is a concern of mine because teams are just going to roll coverage, put somebody in Deuce's face and have somebody shading his side. Maybe the linebacker is out just a little bit further to take away the slants, and you got a safety shaded that way. That's a problem. Cannot happen. You must have a number 2 receiver. Who is it? And then finally, Landon Thomas, just overall, I think he's a guy that is elite in terms of his upside. He had a good freshman season. Can they find a way to get him the ball consistently from game 1 all the way through game 12? Yes or no? I don't see how you don't focus on him, and Gus has done a good job with H-backs and tight ends in his career, but they got to really focus on it. And that's, again, a part of it's Thomas just having chemistry with him, but we need to find that. When we come back, I'm going to discuss a few of the goals between now and the end of spring overall as a team. That is next here on Locked on Seminoles. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. For me, just looking at it this way, I'm not a real patient guy, so I look at it from a convenience standpoint. Can you post it quickly and get a result? With Upwork, posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, multiple qualified candidates are going to be likely there for you to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to connect with the top talent and grow your business today. I talked about Florida State on both sides of the ball, and I want to make one extra point here before we dive into just a little bit more about the media blackout and what it means. They need to have some chemistry that was just completely lost last season, not only with the team, but the media didn't trust what was going on because of how Norvell was so positive going into all of it. It made the media look bad because a lot of them, myself included, had super high expectations, and they just completely bottomed out. 2 wins is pathetic. So they need to gain trust from everybody within the system, the coaching staff, the new coaches, the old coaches. Everybody has to believe in each other. We're not going to be able to grade that. As much as I hate to say that, there's no way to grade it completely. But some of the goals and the overall thoughts about the team between now and the end of spring, that's something that Norvell and his staff have to figure out. You can't have a hint, not any smell from that 2024 season, that stench left on the Florida State program. It must be eliminated. If Florida State does not, this program will be stuck in basically neutral. There's too much talent here to see it not really go to a bowl game each year moving forward, even if they do just a subpar job. That being the case, the expectations are different. Could they get into a big problem at the end of the year with Norvell, et cetera, if they don't win more than 6 games? I think so. But I still don't see them getting fired. And in some ways, that's the worst scenario possible. Being in between, recruits get a little weary and it's hard to sign guys, and then you're stuck in perpetuity for really just being mediocre. Florida State needs either this team to take off or to fall apart. I know fans don't like to hear that, but nobody cares about 7-5 football long term. This year, they might go 7-5. That's okay because you're turning the corner. But beyond that, this season needs to make it clear, no doubt, that beginning in 2026, this is a team that's going to be 9+ wins. Can they do that? Do they show the parts of the game that last year were just awful? Turnover margin, special teams plays that were beyond the kickers. I mean, the kicker was unbelievable and the punter was too. Both those guys get paid. But the coverage teams, all the little things that Florida State would miss last year in critical moments, an offsides penalty, a holding call, a pass interference, whatever it was, they shot themselves in the foot. They had no continuity in any way. I don't think the players believed in themselves. I don't think the players believed in a lot of the coaches. And there's too much selfishness in general. All of that's got to go away. Again, I don't know how you measure that, but that's just something to think about. Florida State's got more than just blocking and tackling, putting in the systems. They got to have belief in each other. Finally, I want to touch on this as I've mentioned a couple of times. If you have not heard, Florida State is all but at least projected, barring something unforeseen, to have pretty much a media blackout during spring. There's one practice, and I believe it's a scrimmage, but if they're going to be close to blacked out, that scrimmage is going to be basic. They're not going to show anything. So I'm curious what they do. I'm also curious about how much media on social media is thrown out there, not just like press conferences, but actual plays, tackling, blocking, not just drills, not just stretching, not just walking in. Are they going to show something? This is why. Bobby Bowden was the one guy that was the master of media back in the day. Before social media and Twitter and all that, he was the guy that when they had testing results, when they had anything in terms of players doing well in the offseason, they published it. All their testing numbers, everything. In the 90s, here you go. This is what here's our depth chart. We don't care. And they kick the crap out of you anyway. It's just ironic that after a 2-10 season, to me, that you're pulling away. Now, I'm sure Norvell has a million answers, and I've heard some of his commentary about why he's doing it. I say hogwash. I think he's concerned about all the negativity. That's my opinion. He better be good this season from the get-go, because while I don't work in the local media, it won't really impact me. The guys and the gals that cover Florida State daily that live there in part because they go to practices and I've had that pulled away from them. If Florida State starts poorly this season, or if anything goes wrong off the field, they're going to be a lot more likely to drop the hammer. Norvell is on thin ice as it is. This is a risky move. Fair or not, people are emotional and you just made their jobs a gazillion times harder. There's not much content to talk about right now. It's fun if you're a media member with Florida State. If they do not start fast, and that includes the Alabama game, I expect some guys that might be a little more passive with negative comments to be like, the heck with this and drop the hammer. Maybe I'm wrong. But again, that media blackout thing, that's a really testy thing. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Please hit that like button and that notification bell and subscribe to the Locked On Seminoles podcast. See you again later on Wednesday. Take care.